live, and I'm going to record this and put it on YouTube. So if you don't feel comfortable saying something that's going to be public, just choose not to say it. You can be part of the discussion, but just remember other people will see it. And if it's something you feel uncomfortable about, just leave it out of the conversation. And what a recording. So everyone mute their mic if you're not talking. And if you want to be part of the conversation, you can raise your hand physically like this, or there's a raise hand option in Zoom somewhere, which Freddie can maybe help you with if you can't figure that out. Freddie's gonna monitor the chat and the face group live group for us. So if people have questions, he's gonna pop in and let us know about that. And so what's gonna happen is Chris is gonna share a slide that's a passage out of the book that will deal with disability, an experience of disability that she had. And I think even though that was like such a long time ago, we all still experience the same thing still today. So we're going to talk about that. And then maybe we can have a little discussion of what we can do to keep pushing more for our rights as disabled people. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris Cholis, who I'm so excited to do this with. Chris and I decide to do this, and it's exciting, and
Freddie has a notice.
And Freddie is raising his hand. Go ahead, Freddie.
You're not streaming to Facebook yet.
I know. I just wanted to tell the rules and stuff before I don't know. I didn't want the public to know about our little process. That's only for the Zoom people. Okay, so I'm going to go to Facebook Live right now. Just give me a second.
And Hector had a question. He wants to know where the filters are, like what.
He wants to know how Anya's doing what she's doing. Anya, tell
me. You want to
him.
explain where you get those filters?
Okay. Oh, see, I got blurry again. So weird. So yeah, there's a little arrow by the video icon where it says stop video. You press that arrow, and then there's choose virtual background or choose video filter. And I went to choose video filter. And then you can just play with a bunch of them, apparently.
Are you going to filter your face?
Priya's doing the background.
Are you going to filter your face, Hector? You'd have to go put your camera on.
Yeah, there will be no filtering of my face. All right, and then next.
Okay, I forget how I do this. I am, Robert. I'm trying to figure out how to do it. I forget how I do this. Gosh darn it. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure out how to do this. Event logs action. How does it
I think Priya, you bring it up on your desktop and then share screen.
No. This is something else. I'm trying to get it on Facebook Live, but they, of course, changed it all as usual. I'm just going to try this again. It's okay.
Someone said the volume's low, Hector.
Okay, that's cool. Let me just do this first. Sorry, guys. We're all having technical problems. Or just me, not everybody. Not everyone.
So while we're working on that, just might just say a little bit about how many of you have had a chance to look at the book by Judy Heumann? Anybody? Anybody have a chance to read it or look at it? Not yet? Okay. So no problem. We're going to learn together.
Pauline, help me. That's not work. Pauline, you have to help me figure out this Facebook Live stuff.
Okay. Are you, do you see the 3 dots at the bottom right where it says more?
Oh yeah. No, I'm already on my way to the Facebook Live thing. I'm just in Facebook and it's just changed. I don't know. It's not like it was before. So of course, because it's Facebook.
Right. Okay. So then did it say going into, so you're at the Facebook and it asked you where you wanted to stream?
Yeah. And I picked the page and now it's asking me to put in a title because it's required. So I'm doing that.
Okay.
So I put in the title. What is going on? Okay, I put in the title and then on the screen, I see the Zoom, but I'm not sure,
So usually there's a button that you have to push that says start live.
Yeah, it's not lit up. So now I'm just,
I can't help.
let me share my screen so you can see what's
Okay.
going on.
Okay.
So this is what it's looking like, the window.
Okay, one second, let me move this. Okay, try say something about it. Let's see if you fill that in.
Book discussion.
Okay.
Oh, there, now it's like, I had to
Okay.
write a description. That's what was going on. All right. Cool.
Okay. Now we know.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, so you want to unshare your screen now?
Oh, yeah. Now I got to stop the share. Okay. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Pauline.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Pauline. Okay, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is great. And Chris, proceed. Start.
Okay. Well, my motto is we need to have a humble posture of learning. And that takes care of everything. So there's no experts. We're all learning how the world works and our role in it. This book is amazing. If you haven't had a chance to read it, hopefully you'll get a copy or audio edition or some way and go through it on your own. And then when we meet to discuss it, you'll have a better view of what Judy went through and how it relates to each of us here. So I wanted to start to set the mood with a really 1-minute clip from a brief interview with Judy and a few colleagues from Ability 360 here in Phoenix that I thought would give us just a feeling of what we're about to enter. So I'm going to screen share here and put this 1-minute video on. And then after that, we'll introduce ourselves. And then we'll begin looking at some of the fascinating parts of being human. So let's see if I can find it. Almost there.
Until then, we can look at Anya's filtering. Oh, no, never mind. Too late, Anya.
Okay. Tell me, is that clear? Can everybody hear?
There needs to be more fight.
It's a little.
We have to feel like we're in positions of power and responsibility. But there needs to be more fight.
It's sounding a little bit.
The sound isn't very good?
No, it isn't. That's
Chris, when you share the screen, there's several options. You could share this to a regular screen. You could share a window, and you could share. It says optimize. Usually, it's a little checkbox you have to hit at the bottom of share screen, where it says optimize video and audio for sharing video.
See if I can find that.
Yeah, maybe stop sharing and then reshare again.
Okay. Oh, optimize. Okay. See, we're learning together. Shall we try it now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
There is no equality.
Was that any better?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Okay. Okay, let me start it. Okay.
We have to feel like we're in positions of power and responsibility. That there needs to be more fighting. There is no equality. And to me, equality means equal, and equal means in every sense of the word.
I knew forced to make those changes. Expected to be impressed by it, but I wasn't quite expected for how much of a badass you would be.
And I really want people to be able to come up and say, Judy Heumann badass. I am a badass. But all of you are badasses, so you know what I mean? That's fine.
Join us for a multi-part video series exploring the history, themes, and lessons in Being Human, an unrepentant memoir of a disability rights activist by Judy Heumann and Kristen Joyner.
So that's the introduction to a series of interviews that she did last summer with Ability 360. They're all short clips between 6 minutes and 15. We may show from time to time, if our discussion continues, we may show one here and there. We'll end today with one of them. And let me get out of here. Okay. Sorry about that. But there's a series of 9 clips, and I'll put the link in the chat for everybody to get.
And if someone doesn't get it, it's actually on YouTube, and the group is called Ability 360. And just look up Being Human Ability 360, and it should pop up.
So I'm putting it in the chat now. So that's the link, and there's nine clips. So those are good to look at on your own. Okay, so let's start now with having a chance for everybody to introduce themselves. I think some of us know each other, but some of us don't. So maybe Priya, you can help us kind of who goes first and all that.
Okay, Tylea, you start.
Hi everyone, my name's Tylea Flores. I am a 25-year-old disability advocate. I am the founder of Stomping on CP and author of James Ticking Time Bomb.
Thank you, Tylea. Hector, do you want to go next? Hector?
Yeah, first of all, can you hear me? I know you guys had some trouble hearing me.
Yeah.
All right, my name is Hector Del Valle. I'm a social worker out in Central Florida, and excited about what we're going to learn about Judy and her book today.
Thanks, Hector. Katrina, do you have audio today? What's up?
Yes, my name's Katrina. I'm a college student going towards my major in psychology, and I will be going to to learn not to become a counselor for people with disabilities.
Awesome, thank you. Pauline. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Pauline?
My name is Pauline Victoria. I'm the founder of One Leg Up Productions, a media company intended to engage, entertain, and empower people with disabilities.
Yes, and she has a great show on YouTube called Chair Chat, so watch that. Freddie?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Freddie Ladner, and I'm from the Houston area.
Thank you, Freddie. Peggy? You're on mute, Peggy.
I'm Peggy Nolan. I've known Priya forever. I guess I don't think about disability. I just think about people.
Yeah.
But my family has been very involved in the ARC. 2 of my family members have worked there in San Francisco. So it's always been part of our spreading the joy, helping folks in whatever. So Thank you for inviting me to this.
Oh, thanks for coming, Peggy. And Peggy's got a big family of I've been friends with her family forever. She's got like 7 kids, and I'm friends with all of them. And I'm so happy to see her here. Okay, who did I miss? Anya, did I get to you, Anya? I know Anya's like, no, I just want to do the filters.
I'm here now. I think I'm sticking to this one because it's simple and I like it.
It's cute.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anya. I reside in California. Yeah, I'm in Monterey right now, but usually I'm in San Diego. 2 very terrible places to live. It's beautiful. Yeah, I do a lot of advocacy work, but primarily I do a lot of fitness for people with disabilities. So I'm a group fitness instructor for people with disabilities, and yeah, that's pretty much how I spend my time currently.
Yeah, no, it's great. And she does these online classes. So if you're on Facebook, go check that out. Renee, what do you want to say about yourself? You'll have to unmute your mic. Okay, cool.
This laptop, it's not very loud. So my name is Renee Cobbison. I'm in Oregon. It looks like I had MS for a long time, but it really didn't hit me until I was about 50. I was already a lawyer then. And so I've been home though, like not working as a lawyer for like 10 years, even though I'd hate to admit that. And as my disability is getting worse. And I was working for an Indian tribe, the local Indian tribe here, Confederate Tribes Umatilla Indian Reservation. And so I was into Indian law, or I am into Indian law and Indian issues. Then I became really disabled, and now I'm looking at like I don't know anything about disability law. And so I'm kind of embarrassed that I'm a lawyer. I'm in these groups, I don't know anything. So I've been trying to figure it out a little bit. And as I figure it out, I'm thinking about writing it down so that like everybody else can come with me as I'm learning it maybe. Or probably other people maybe already know stuff about the Disability Act and stuff like that. But it's complicated. We have a local disability rights group here that's fighting for accessibility for people to protest in Portland. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's so Portland. And I had to put that out there. It has nothing to do with anything. I know you're introducing yourselves, but I thought it was great. I thought it was hysterical, actually. It's cool. Okay, never mind. Bye.
Well, that's an important point because we are discussing about Judy Heumann, and that's like something disabled people have been complaining a lot about, like all these protests are going on and it's not accessible for disabled people.
People have been complaining about that, really?
Oh yeah, that's like a big thing people talk about.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you came upon a subject and you didn't even know.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Now I'm going to have to become an expert.
Okay, thanks, Renee. I appreciate that. Willis.
Yes.
Hi, nice
hey.
to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you as well. So hello, everyone. I am Willis Washington. I'm the Executive Director of LIFT, L-I-F-T. I'm also peer mentor advocate for people with disabilities, the ADA consultant, and the ADA compliance inspector out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Oh, amazing. That's awesome.
Yep.
We love you. We love you. Thank you.
Hey, we'll love on Hector a little bit. He invited me.
Oh, no, I love Hector too. So,
Yeah.
Hector's in my documentary. So, learn all about Hector. Okay. I think that's, Robert, do you want to say something? You have to take yourself off mute. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah. I thought this was the Justin Bieber fan club. No. I'm Robert Price. I'm Priya's significant other, I guess, or insignificant other. And I'm also a musician, and I work for a radio station. I think that's about it.
And he's essentially my caregiver as well. Okay, so and then okay, you go, Chris. I'll go last. You go first. You have to unmute yourself.
Well, she keeps acting the way she's acting. Somebody's gonna do it.
I'll let Linda say something first.
Okay.
Hey everybody, I'm so happy to have a chance to meet with you. We've been really looking forward to this program that you can focus on their lovely book, that powerful book. So I'm happy to meet with you. Now, Chris and I have been married for many years, and we have 6 children, 12 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Yay!
Oh my goodness! Yay! Oh my God, Chris, you didn't reveal that information. That's great.
That's kind of personal. That's not in the recording now.
It's like Linda's the personal one. I'm just.
Right. Gotta watch what we say here. I noticed someone had has just joined the room. Maybe before I talk, we could invite.
Oh, did someone come in?
Yeah, Haley.
Oh, Haley. Hey, is it Hal or Hale? How do you say your name? Haley?
Haley.
Haley.
Oh, Haley, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
I'm from New York.
New York City or in the state of New York?
New York City.
Awesome. Really welcome. I'm always interested to meet people from New York City right now. It seems really crazy there. So thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. Okay, Chris, did you want to say something more about yourself, or?
I'll say a little bit. My name's Chris, and I'm a polio survivor. I grew up in Colorado. I got polio in the 1952 epidemic. It was a couple of years before a vaccine came out. So I kind of grew up with leg braces and crutches. So when I read this book, I said, in many places, I said, boy, this is my story. I know I wasn't in a wheelchair when I was young like Judy was, but I felt some of the things that she experienced was like, that's my autobiography too. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this book, because it was very close to home. As a disabled person, before we started getting legislation, there were barriers, just going out your door, everything was a barrier. And so I thought this book would help all of us, whether we're disabled or not, to have an appreciation of the civil rights struggle for people with disabilities. So I will say one more thing is, civil rights movements always start in obscurity. They, whether it's a civil rights for people of color or for women or whatever, they've always started in obscurity, and they don't get moving until there's voices. And it's the voices that move the process forward. So one of the things I hope we can appreciate in this book is some of the voices in the disability movement that have brought us forward to where we have some legislation to make our stores and our buildings and our programs accessible and make life a little bit more like we're part of the world and not invisible. So with that, is there anything else that anyone wants to say? I think we're looking at maybe going an hour. I don't want to run too long. And then if we like it, if we feel this is fruitful, we'll do it on a regular basis, either once a month or every other week, whatever we feel would be good. I don't think we're not going to read the whole book. We're just going to go by themes, like I said, and we'll see how it goes. So, but at any time, there's the chat box. If you have a link to something you think would be interesting to share, you can use the chat box. Freddie and Priya will be watching that, so if there's messages there, we can stop and share those.
So I just wanted, I'll tell you about myself, but just before we start, I want to say in the discussion, there is a raise hand option, or you can physically raise your hand, but if we're not catching you because we're so caught up in what we're doing, go ahead and write it in the chat and say, oh, I want to talk. And Freddie's monitoring the chat, so we'll get to you eventually. We just might not see you, so please forgive us. It's not a personal, it's just, us figuring out how to do things. And, I'm Priya. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I had a spinal cord injury in 1999. And, that was when then I started learning about how disabled people are invisible in our communities, and which is funny to me because I know we all come up with this term called TAB, TAB, temporarily able body, which we, you know, the disabled community is like everybody can get a disability. And so for you not to think about how to include disabilities is really just hurting yourself, because all of us will end up disabled in some way, shape, or form one day. So we need to think about it. So let's go. That's it. That's my thing.
So I can see already we have a lot of expertise here. So as we go along, I think feel free to share what you've been learning and what you're dealing with, because it's going to be good for all of us. And so
Exactly.
With that, let's go to looking at disability rights, issues and experiences. Let me know if you can see this all right.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. So we're going to take this first slide here. Hopefully this works. Okay. This is in the beginning of the book, and Priya, you want to read it? This is from the prologue of the book. The prologue itself was very powerful.
Yeah, sure. So is that page 11? I forgot my Roman. Excellent, I think it's 11. But anyway, institutionalization was the status quo in 1949. Parents were not necessarily even encouraged to visit their institutionalized children. Kids with disabilities were considered a hardship economically and socially. They brought stigma to the family. People thought that when someone in your family has a disability, it was because someone had done something wrong. Evil eye, sin, curse from God, etc. In Nazi Germany, children were institutionalized and killed. 5,000 children were murdered in these institutions. The Nazis considered people with disabilities a genetic and financial burden on society, life unworthy of life. Yeah. Judith, especially her mother, were optimists and fighters. Discuss how family support makes a big difference to a child with disability growing up. There's an echo, and I don't know why that's happening.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, I don't know. It's not, there's nothing to be sorry. I have no idea why that's happening.
So in the book, Judy explains that it was her mother was sent to live with people in Chicago she didn't even know, just to escape the horrors of World War II. And so she became very protective of Judy when Judy was diagnosed with polio. So the discussion here is how is family support help us, like in the case of Judy or many of us, to try to work to be as independent as possible and fight institutionalization or anything that would keep us back.
Can I go first on that?
Yeah, go.
Ilea, go ahead.
I would have to say, Judy's parents kind of remind me of my mother and stepdad, particularly my mother, because she had me in 1995 and she had me when she was a teenager and she had to do it by herself. She was a single parent. My biological father decided he cared more about his sporting career than us, so it was just her, and she's been my number one force too. And then when my stepdad came along, he became that force too, so I feel like that's very important. And it shapes us to be the people who we are once we have supportive loved ones and family members, because it takes a village to raise someone like us, because it's not easy. So
thanks, Tylea.
So there's a question, just to repeat the question. So we're looking at, okay, in the case of Judy, she says her parents were a strong reason why she stayed independent. The family support she had because of their experience in Germany was they were not going to let that happen to their child, that she would ever be sent away. And so there was a strong advocate in their own house. So the question is, what is anyone else's experiences with having that family support, and what kind of difference that made for you?
I mean, I can talk about that, but I'd like to give up. I talk all the time, so if anyone
I
else
guess
wants to talk.
Pauline has her hand. Pauline has raised her.
Oh, go ahead, Pauline.
It's okay. You can say it, Chris. I raised my hand.
I read it.
Even though Pauline's
Pauline McRae raised her hand.
I love technology. It's the one place I can have hands and do thumbs ups. So yes, I would agree with that. I definitely relate to what Tylea was saying. I felt like my parents gave me this beautiful balance of nurture and tough love, which means they gave me the space to really figure out what I could do. Even if I was getting angry or frustrated, they didn't just come and swoop in to my rescue. They just allowed me to have that space to be angry and to experience what I was made of.
Wow. Thank you, Pauline. Anyone else? Go on, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree that my parents were a huge aspect or a huge reason that I was able to get in touch with the resources that I need to live like as successful of a life as possible. But one thing that I know that they made sure that they did was make sure that they weren't like the sole resource. They wanted to make sure that they kind of created pathways so that I could take or get in touch with other people so that, like, say, I don't know, they're unable to support me at some point, I have at least another network to rely on or to go to if I get stuck at some point. So that's something that I really value and I don't take for granted.
Thanks, Anya. That's really great. Hector?
Yeah, there's a couple things I wanted to touch on. First of all, I feel like my family gave me that balance, but I definitely recall my dad, because I was doing so much driving when I first got injured, and I was driving, speaking all over the place. And so I just remember my dad, would prefer that I stay home. Why are you taking those risks, driving on the road? What happens if something happens to you? Who's going to help you? Blah, blah. And he was just constantly just giving me all this fear and doubt that I really didn't need, And my mom was a little bit more supportive about it. She would always say, just let him do what he's doing. He's at least he's getting out of the house. He's doing something, So I think I had that. I think it was a balance later on as I could reflect on it, but I definitely saw both sides of my parents and how they treated the disability. And then the last thing I just wanted to know from this group here, and Chris and Priya, is do you guys see if there's a difference between people who were born with a disability and the family support that they had there compared to someone who then got an injury later on? Because when I was going to rehab, I tell this a lot of my stories that I saw a lot of divorces from the people that I was roommates with. Their wives were leaving them. They just, they couldn't understand the disability, so they weren't getting a lot of family support. So that's just been my observation. Good group so far. I'm enjoying it.
Thanks, Hector. I guess since Hector had a spinal cord injury and I did, because we weren't born with our disabilities, I'll just go after Hector because I had kind of the opposite experience of Hector. Both my parents were extremely supportive. My mom had a disability. No, she wasn't born with it, but she pretty much had it all my life. She had rheumatoid arthritis. And my dad was my dad, I don't even know. People that know my dad know what kind of a person he is, but he's similar to me, but he was even more, I don't know what the word, wiser, more like, practical about advice. So yeah, both my parents, after I became disabled, they did give me a place to live to get used to the transition. But Robert was my partner and he came with me. And once we moved in, they pretty much just let Robert and I, my dad bought a house that had like a basement that was like our own space. So they really gave us the freedom to figure out how I could transition from being able-bodied to disabled. And then I did a bunch of, I know in my parents' mind, they're like, oh my God, what is Priya doing? So then I like moved to LA, then I moved to the Bay Area, and I just did all kinds. I was in my band, and so I was going to shows, and sometimes I'd call them on the phone by accident, and in the middle of the night, they'd be like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, it was an accident. So yeah, my parents allowed me to do things. I'm sure they were totally freaked out, but they also knew that I had to like figure out my own way living in a world as a disabled person. So I was lucky to have really two very, very supportive parents.
I see Willis has got something to add to the conversation.
Yes. So I was injured a little later in life due to a motorcycle accident. I believe I was just turned 38, I believe, 37 or 38. And so I had, kind of lived, so to speak, my life, if you will. I'd had some opportunities to travel and kind of experience life and do some things that some people do get to do and some people haven't done yet. And so it was kind of a mixed bag for me as far as becoming disabled, because of course that's never how I saw my life. But as a result of the experiences I had had prior to my accident, I was kind of, I think, in a different place as far as acceptance. And from a family perspective, I've been fortunate enough to always have a real close family support, even prior to becoming disabled. But I saw how that showed up even more so after I became a peer mentor for other individuals who had become disabled. And, there was a huge difference. It's probably as wide as the Grand Canyon as far as the people who had support and the people who didn't. And as far as how long it took them to embrace and accept, their new normal. And it was challenging, for certain ones to try to motivate and uplift them if they didn't have support. And I understood why, but I think after, everybody kind of has their own timetable as far as their acceptance of what's happened and whatnot. But I definitely think even the ones that didn't have the family support, luckily they were at some point around the campfire, so to speak, with one of our local support groups, which definitely eventually brought them around. So I just really wanted to say, yeah, family support is huge. I think in the area of acceptance and moving forward, because a lot of times that's what I tell some of the newbies, I call them, that I go see at the rehab hospitals. They kind of look at me like I'm crazy, but I tell them they have a 50-50 shot of coming out of this. Either they're going to accept it and move forward, with the cards they were dealt, or they're going to kind of waddle in their own misery and, not do so good, probably slip into depression, and it's going to be a really tough road. So.
Great. Thanks, Willis. That's great.
Yeah, I think growing up with the disability, because I had my polio when I was 2, so I hadn't even remembered walking. So it was like, this is my normal anyway. So I didn't have any adjustment. I don't know how it would have been if I would have had an accident, say when I was in my 20s or something, how the adjustment period would have been. But being disabled from the very early part of my life, the family was already there. We had a good start. And my mom she was an RN, and she was a real fighter. So she wasn't going to put me in any special schools. So I was very fortunate to have that. And then I'm not chained. My wife's chained to me here, so she can't do anything. But that's another aspect of marriage is a big challenge a lot of times with a disability. But there again, I was already disabled when I met my wife, so it was either she's going to accept me this way or she's not. So there was I don't think there was a big adjustment for her to say yes or no, but she can speak to that.
I'm still very happy. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. And Hector, I think you were asking about a difference between people that were born with disabilities and without. And although there's different experiences, that I think as far as parents go, some of us get blessed with having really great supportive parents to help us through it, and some don't. And I don't think it necessarily matters whether you were born with it or you had it later. So that's my opinion. Oh, go ahead, Katrina. Katrina, raise your hand.
Yeah, my disability came when I was 9 months old. So I was hit by a drunk driver. And so basically my family and basically like my family's been really supportive. And like when it comes to like doctor's appointments and stuff like that, I do have like my mom comes with me and everything, because I don't know I know my story, but I don't know enough to share with the doctor. But beyond that, so it's basically my mom and my family, and they kind of help encourage me to, kind of help, what's the word I'm looking for? To like teach me to do things for myself, because there are times where I do need help. So, getting my disability is basically learning, so it's kind of difficult for me to learn at some things. So, yeah.
Thanks, Katrina. I appreciate it. And we have a new member, a new joiner. Catherine, go ahead and introduce yourself. We're making everyone introduce themselves, so go ahead.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Priya. My name's Catherine Tan. I met Priya at a show that she played, I guess 2 summers ago.
I know, in Chattanooga, Do You Hear Me, which is gone because of the pandemic.
I know. It was one of the many things that got canceled this year. And so at first I knew that we had music in common, and then I realized that we also had disability activism in common. So I am a book editor, and one of the areas that I focus on is disability. My colleague was the editor of Being Heumann, so I'm very excited about the book, both personally and professionally. So I just wanted to drop into this meeting that Priya was having, and it's great to meet you all.
Thanks, Catherine. It's great to meet you too. And I think now, should we move to the next slide, Chris? Or?
Yeah. There's another issue that comes up later in the book, and I think it comes up in the movie Crip Camp, about getting weaned away from overprotective parents. So I mean, in the beginning you want it, right? But then after a while, I said, "Hey, Mom, I can do that on my own," or Dad, just give me the keys to the car. I'm all right, So that's later in the book. So I'm going to go on.
Yeah, Chris, it's interesting because when I had my injury, I did my rehab at Shepherd Center, which is one of the top spinal cord injury rehab centers. And they would always have these little rap sessions. I would call them rap sessions, but they weren't really raps. They were just like sessions to kind of tell you like what to do and such. And they're like, there's going to become a time where your family or whoever's helping you do this transition, you're not going to need them as much anymore. So you're going to have to learn how to have this conversation of, hey, I can do this now. So, and my parents were there for that. So I think that was another reason my parents were like, okay, Priya can do this now. We just got to let her go. So I thought that was really great that they did that.
All right, going on to another part early in the first chapter. And in this one, Judy is talking about her neighborhood. Her neighborhood was inaccessible, but it's interesting to see what she says about it. Priya, or someone, would you like to read this?
Yeah. Who wants? I can read it. Who wants to read it?
Was that Talia that said she could read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The polio epidemic of 1949, 3,000 children affected. Judy was a paraplegic. Discussion. Growing up in an unaccessible neighborhood. I can't see the rest of it because I think you guys are in the way, but I got it. Describe 6 years. At 6 years old, going to visit an old manual. Miraculous incline in the sidewalk. For someone with weakened muscle, having a wheelchair, if she let up all the limbs, she would roll backwards and have to roll over. And can somebody take the rest of it?
Thank you, Talia. Okay, I'll continue. I landed in front of Arlene's stoop and looked at the 3 stairs up to the door. I couldn't get my wheelchair up to the stairs to ring Arlene's doorbell, which meant I had to sit on the sidewalk in front of her house and yell for her to come out and play. Parentheses, no cell phones back then. Her neighbor friends always included her in play. In page 7 it says, it didn't occur to me then to think it unusual that I joined in all the kids' games in my wheelchair, because there was never a question of whether or not I would play too. We all figured out a way for me to do whatever everyone was doing. Kids are problem solvers, but it taught me at a very early age that most things are possible when you assume problems can be solved.
Yeah. Yeah, Judy, it's so true.
So any experiences growing up in your neighborhood of if you were already disabled when you were young, how you got around, or once you were disabled, what were your initial experiences with the terrain around your life? How did you negotiate that?
Well, I would like to go first. And
Yeah, sure.
With that, I would like to share a story about this young boy in the neighborhood. His name was Nico, and his real name was Nicholas. He was a real chubby kid. I met him in the 3rd grade. He was my first friend at Sterling Elementary, and he'd be the one to push me around my neighborhood. If I couldn't go outside and play, Nico would figure out a way for me to go outside and play. There was one point where he wanted me to go over to his house and play PlayStation, but I was in my Lightgate walker, my green one at the time, and he was like, "No, Miss Lisette, don't worry about it. I'll take Talia and I'll make sure she walks." So Nico did that for me, and he stayed with me step by step. So I'm forever thankful for Nico and that experience in teaching me about exclusion. Sadly, I haven't kept in touch with Nico throughout all the years, but hopefully I get to see him again someday. And how I would go around in the neighborhood, I would use my wheelchair to get around, mostly my power wheelchair, but when I had a manual wheelchair, it was difficult. And it used to be so funny because when I was in school in the 4th grade, I never forget this, at my first day at my new school, nobody knew who I was at Mirror Lake Elementary, but they all just accepted me. But when it came to PE, I got a little nervous because at my old school, they would send me to the principal's office to look at the security cameras. And the coach was like, "We're not doing that." Coach Curtis was like, "No, we're not doing that. You're going to play kickball with the rest of the kids." And I got to play kickball.
Yay.
Yay.
So it was the best day of my life as a 4th grader. So yeah, those are my good positive experiences.
Wow.
Thanks so much, Talia.
You're welcome.
I think Hector has his hand raised. So Hector, do you want to go?
Yeah, no, I definitely remember having my injury. I was 17 years old, 82. And so we didn't have the ADA yet there. And so, and we lived on a hill. And I'm grateful that I had a motorized chair because, man, I think the neighbors used to think it was just amazing that I would just go off on my own, up this hill. And it was I used to go out a good 2 miles, 3 miles up this hill because we were at the bottom of the hill. So I would always go up the hill, and I would spend a lot of time up there with friends and stuff like that. Unfortunately, you know, the way my friends and the community dealt with my disability was through drinking and smoking weed, you know. So that's the way we showed our camaraderie. You know, this is the way, Hector, you're still Hector, so let's go out and smoke some weed, you know. So, and that's the way we were accepted with that. I mean, I definitely don't encourage that, but it was just the way that our community was kept together, and that's the way they made me feel part of. So I really always have to give it out there to Dover, New Jersey, because that's where I grew up in, and they were always very supportive. I'm talking about the bigger part of the community where they just made me feel accepted. So it was a good time in that sense of it, as far as the community and my neighborhood.
Cool. Thanks, Hector. It was the 80s. I think lots of communities dealt with socialized in that way. But thanks for sharing that. Who would like to talk about something about that? Anyone else? Go, Willis. Yes.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think I have a lot to add, but I can distinctly remember I was in pretty good shape before my motorcycle accident, but I was amazed at how much strength I lost, because I think I was in the hospital. I went from the trauma ICU to the ICU regular. And then at about 6 months, almost 7, in a hospital, it seemed like, after my accident. And but I was really amazed at how weak I had become. So as far as getting around, trying to transfer, turn over in the bed, get dressed, all those different things were just exhausting. And, once I started sort of getting the hang of it, I guess you could say, I still knew that it was going to be really tough. I mean, just pushing myself short distances on level ground, I was exhausted, and it was just like, man, how am I going to do this, But in time, with the help of some other people within that peer support group, we were lucky enough that I was introduced to a local clinic that unfortunately is no longer in existence, called Neuro, specifically a occupational therapist named Teresa Tisdale, who I always tell her she saved my life, because she pushed us, but that clinic was specifically set up for people with spinal cord injuries. And what I didn't think I needed at the very beginning of that was more or less what I would call it kind of, when it was introduced to me, it gave me the impression of like an AAA meeting, and I wasn't a real drinker. So I was like, I don't need that. But after I started going, I realized that I did need it. And, just the camaraderie that we developed, the friendships and the relationships, I started to really see some magic, happen, which is, Hector were talking about it earlier today, and it's just the sharing of information, what doctors to go to, this worked for me, and those sort of things. So that's all I really wanted to add.
Wow.
Thanks, Willis. That's great. Anyone else have anything they want to add here? Because I also have a lot of stories, because before I had my injury, I'm in a band. I'm still in the band, but I was in the band before I had my injury, and it was a DIY band. So a lot of shows would happen in people's houses, or just like spaces people could find to do shows. And before I became disabled, I didn't realize they were inaccessible. So then I had my injury. I, lived with my parents, did my transition, and then, I was ready to go back into the world to be in my band. And I didn't think about the inaccessibility of that scene. So then I started, and this will be like a story I'll share for the first show I ever played. I think it was about a year after my injury, in Chattanooga. That's where I met Catherine. But like Chattanooga is like a huge connection as far as friends for my band. They're essentially like my family there. So I was like, okay, we're moving to California. We're gonna come through Chattanooga to say bye to all our Southern friends. So they're like, okay, you guys have to play a show. And we're like, okay. And so some 2 people volunteered to play with us. They learned the songs in like 2 days. And then the show was like in this house that was like a Victorian that had like 20 steps to get into it. And I was like, oh, how am I going to get in there? And then they're like, we're going to get you in. And so everybody just grabbed me, lifted me up the stairs and brought my wheelchair up the stairs and got me in there, and we played, and it was really great. But then afterwards I realized everyone was really drunk. And I was like thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that because they could have dropped me, but they didn't. They got me up the stairs. But then in hindsight, I was like, maybe maybe I'll just transfer and push myself up the stairs instead of having a drunk group of people carry me up a flight of stairs and trip and fall and drop me. But that didn't happen. They got me up the stairs. It was victorious. We played and it was fun. And that was kind of my experience. I continued to play music. I actually went to South by Southwest, and this label in New York put our music out, and we toured. So it was kind of depending on that community and saying, hey, I'm disabled, I'm in a wheelchair, how are we going to do this? And they're like, okay, we're going to figure it out. So, and that's why I love the DIY community. That's why I called my grassroots group DIY Abled, because I feel being in the disability community is another DIY community. So I felt that helped me, helped me to transition from what I did. So yeah, that was my story of people helping me out, and that was great.
Other stories? Anybody else have something they want to highlight from your early experiences with a disability and trying to navigate your own neighborhood? I might just briefly say, go ahead.
Anya says something.
Anya, go ahead.
Well, I mean, living in the States was super easy, but I lived in Poland for a bit, and that was a totally different experience in terms of accessibility and people's openness to help whenever I was stuck. So in Poland, especially when I was younger, the basic idea was this, that people with disabilities were like hidden from view, staying in their parents' houses or whoever, their caretakers' houses, and not living an independent life. And so like here I am, an American who's had all of these resources, who comes to Poland and is expecting like this like warmth from people, and it just never really existed. So like I wanted to add something different. Like in Poland, if I hadn't had like my parents there, or my family who lived in the States with me when I was living in Poland, it would be a totally different experience. And I feel like I would like have to advocate times 10 in order for me to get any help if I got stuck, or I needed any sort of like anything like financial needs. If I got injured, I don't know if I would have been able to do it by myself without my family, who knows what it's like to live in the States and also has connections in Poland. So yeah, that was definitely a very different experience. But yeah.
Thanks so much, Anya, for sharing that. I appreciate that. I think Pauline has her hand raised.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you shared that experience, Anya, because I feel like I didn't live in the Philippines, but we would go back and forth to the Philippines quite a bit with my family, because we had a lot of family still there. And it's this interesting dichotomy of like, yes, disabled people were hidden, but when I was out, people were so willing to help at the same time. So it's almost like this conflict, internal conflict culturally of you should be ashamed of having a disability because I think culturally Filipinos see it as you did something wrong, like you sinned, what did you do to deserve a child like this? But at the same time, they're so like welcoming and helpful and nurturing. So it's interesting. I'm glad I didn't have to live there. And I think it makes me like, even we run Airbnb, we live in Hawaii, so we run Airbnb and we've hosted over 40 countries. And I'm always like, how is it in your country? And by far, as much as we know we have work to do for the disability community here in the US, we are much further along than many other countries.
Yeah, that's true, Pauline. And I have to say, like going to India, I wasn't disabled, but I can only, it was like, oh, God has cursed you because you've been born, you have a disabled child, you must have done something wrong type of thing. So I always think, like, coming from that mindset, how a disabled person can even get past that, that wall of,
in some countries, the disability movement, that's where it is. It's just at that stage, going to the higher stage of losing that attitude.
Yeah,
of accepting the disability as not being a sin or a curse. Yeah. Exactly. In Belize where we live, there was half and half. There was a growing awareness that disability had nothing to do with the evil eye. So, but it's a learning curve, right? But that's where the disability movement was when I lived in Belize. And it was nice to see that we were starting to get disabled people to go to regular schools. They wouldn't have to go to the schools that didn't teach anything. And so, yeah. My own experience, I had a great neighborhood. We were really tight knit. All the kids, we were just one big gang. Our family supported us. But going to school, this is the 50s, the nearest school is 2 blocks away. And I think we had, I don't remember how many stairs. It was at least 10, maybe 15 to enter the building. So I'd go with my sisters and my brother, and going up with crutches up those stairs was always dangerous, especially when it snowed and there was ice on the steps. So my mom advocated to have me in another school. So the school was 5 blocks away and it only had 7 steps. So that's where I went through elementary school, was a school that had 7 steps, and I had to walk on my own. I didn't have any family support there. So it was like half and half. So I can really appreciate the 504 to me was like, oh, this is heaven. When 504 came in, schools had to be accessible. My God, what a concept. Yeah.
It almost seemed unfathomable, right?
Yeah, and it was just thought, well, that's the way it is, that's the way it is.
Yeah, it is.
Tough cooking.
Can you briefly describe 504, Chris? What do you mean by 504? I know.
Yeah, we're going to get to it. 504 is, in fact, our whole second part of the book is talking about the 504 struggle. So in the 1970s, and I think under Nixon, they actually had a Vocational Rehabilitation Act that was going to renovate some of the facets of rehabilitation vocationally. And toward the end of the act is a little section called 504. And I don't know if I have a slide I can pull up real quick. But basically 504 section is just a few words, maybe 3 sentences that said every building, government building, had to be accessible to people with disabilities, and the programs had to be accessible. I mean, that was a heavy statement, and I think the people that put it in there, they probably didn't realize what they put in there, because then it took a long time to try to fight it from it getting implemented, because, well, we'll talk about that later, but people are starting to think, how much this is going to cost us? That was the fear. It costs too much money, and people with disabilities aren't worth that much money. So that was the fight that Judy Heumann and others took up, the 504. And we'll be going into that. I don't know if it'll be in this set of slides or next time we meet, but definitely it's a major piece of legislation that affects actually the whole world. And then it set the stepping stones to the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, which then made all public places accessible, and programs and a bunch of other stuff, and employment. So 504 was a really huge leap It was like in civil rights, you know, it was like that was like Article 13 of the Constitution, right? Yeah, and it was major. So let's move on.
I think Hector raised his hand.
Okay.
So go ahead, Hector.
We can go ahead and go on to the next piece there, Chris, and I'll decide if I feel it's important.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks, Hector.
Yeah, we don't have to rush, so.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next slide.
Did I screen share?
Not yet.
Okay. Why didn't the screen share come on? Okay. Okay. So I saw in the chat box that there's an echo when people read. So it said that when I read it didn't echo. So I don't know why, but if that's all right, I'll go ahead and read.
Okay, yeah. I mean, is my voice happening now?
Okay. So this is page 8. This is still early on. And now we're going to school. And I just shared my experience of going to school. And so this was Judy's. Going to school for the first time, not being allowed to attend. They said that Judy is a fire hazard. Seeing wheelchair as a dangerous obstruction. Her mother starts long fight to get her into school. Her father had long hours at the family butcher shop and couldn't help much. Telling Ilse, that's her mom, Ilse Heumann, that something wasn't possible was a big mistake. So this is the issue. Polite ways to say no. Trying to go to Jewish yeshiva school required knowing Hebrew. Her mother was persistent and took Judith to someone to teach her Hebrew. However, the school principal still insisted after Judith spoke Hebrew better than other students, well, it's just not going to work, he said. So anyone have any experiences of being told, politely being told no, which Williamette says, we're not going to listen to you or we're not going to help you?
I'll go.
Okay.
Well, Priya knows the story. Well, when I was in high school, in public high school, they told my mother that I needed to be on a special diploma and I needed to be tested by the school psychiatrist. At first, my mom was like, okay, I'll let you guys do the IQ test. So they do the IQ test, they have the IEP meeting, and they tell me, Talia, you need to go. My mom's like, no, my daughter's staying in here because she needs to hear what you guys are going to have to say. And basically, the school psychiatrist said I had long-term memory loss, short-term memory loss. I couldn't comprehend, I couldn't read, I couldn't write. So basically, what my mom said was, excuse my language, but what my mom said was, what are you trying to say? My daughter can't read shit. And then my mom turns to me, she goes, Ty, what year were you born? I said 95. She goes, who was your doctor that did the surgery? I said, Dr. S. She goes, where was the hospital? I said, Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. And that's when my mom looked at those teachers and she told them, I'm pulling my daughter out of school. She's going to get a standard diploma and I'm just going to homeschool her and freak all of you, basically. And then as soon as I graduated high school on my standard diploma, got standing ovation in front of my whole entire class. My friends helped me put on the cap and gown. We went back to the school where I wrote in my first book, thanks for not believing in me. And I taped a copy of the diploma to the ESC specialist's wall and the principals too. They all got copies.
Yay.
All right.
Lilia. Anyone else?
And we haven't heard from Renee. I wonder if she wanted to say something. Who else have we not heard from? Freddie, did you want to say something?
About last reading more than anything, because I grew up on Long Island, and is this book? She's in New York when she's telling.
She's from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, huh?
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make any sense that a Jewish community would be that negative. I'm really surprised because, you know, I mean, I grew up on Long Island, and my sister's Jewish, and I got a lot of Jewish friends, and they're very inclusive and very supportive, and it's just amazing to me. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Do you have any idea why that was?
I think it's because it was the 50s and there will, you know, the 504 was not really, I don't think it even existed then. And then the ADA didn't exist. So that was like a time where having disabled people in school and getting educated was just not something people did. I think that's why that happened to her.
That was the time in Long Island. I think I remember hearing Willowbrook in your Crip Camp movie. And
Camp Janae?
Willowbrook was the institutional school, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Right, right. And so they were institutionalizing a lot of disabled kids, right, at that time?
Yeah. And Judy's parents were actually asked to institutionalize her, but they, you know, because they were from Germany, World War II, where they were doing that. So they were just like, no, we aren't going to do that. So
there was a major attitude shift in the 70s with the 504 fight. That's when the voices of disabled people and their supporters started really being heard.
Okay, you guys, I heard it the first time. I'm going to admit it. What is 504?
Oh.
504 is the regulations under a federal government act called vocational rehab that said that all buildings, all government buildings and programs had to be accessible to people with disabilities.
Okay, so that happened before the ADA?
That happened in the 70s, right? Yeah, the ADA came out in 1990, quite a few years later, yeah. So this was huge because before that, even the attitude of those of us with disabled, we didn't think we had a right to say anything.
Yeah.
And so we usually didn't
Who
say.
brought that legislation forward? Was that a Kennedy thing, or do you remember? Or?
That was the Rehabilitation Act. I think, was it for World War II veterans or what do you think, Chris? Is that correct? Or
which one is that?
The 504 was included in maybe a rehabilitation
the Rehabilitation Act, right?
For like military.
Early 1970s. Nixon, I think, actually signed it, but didn't. Well, no, Congress passed it, but Nixon didn't sign it. And then Ford kind of passed on it, and then Carter kind of him and hawed, and then finally it was, I think, who eventually signed it. It was under Carter, but it was his HEW cabinet member that was the big elephant in the room that would block everything. So Califano,
yeah.
And we'll cover that when we see we'll see part of the movie, and we'll talk a little bit about you know, how we deal with legislation. That's a big issue for those of us that still think there's a lot that needs to be done in the disability movement. So that's yet to come.
Priya, can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
I have to leave, and I feel so honored to have been involved in this. I wanted to tell you a story about my dad. My dad comes from a German family, and he had epilepsy and kept it a secret. When he was in elementary school, they considered him a freak.
Mm-hmm.
He had a fit, and he was completely traumatized. So he was pretty heavily medicated, and I didn't ever know he was an epileptic. And 4 times in my younger life, he almost died right in front of me. Fell over the stair onto the floor, and my mother just covered it up and said, oh, he just tripped. One time he was out in the ocean, and my mother knew he was having a fit, but we just thought he was playing around.
Mm-hmm.
She had the lifeguard go and save him. And so there was this kind of secrecy and shame attached to this thing that I finally realized when I was an adult, how awful my father must have felt all this time. Anyway, yeah, I'm so glad that times have changed. And Willis, I wish you lived in Florida, because I work in a huge state university that Priya and I graduated from, and there are still places that you cannot get into. There are still bathrooms that are not disabled equipped. I have been a very loud, squeaky voice trying to cause trouble because I'm appalled. But it's still an upward battle.
Okay.
Because of
well, and as
issues of money.
Right. Well, as luck may have it, I am a resident of Oklahoma, but me and Hector have been talking about working on some different projects for years.
Because Hector's from
So in the
Florida.
future, see
Good.
myself. Yeah. So I do see myself commuting back and forth. So if you need some help on something,
Okay,
definitely
well,
let
I'm
me know.
about to retire, but there's 55,000 students at Florida International University, and they're due for some inspections.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I love you all, but I gotta go.
We'll get something set up.
I'm gonna buy the book. I can't wait.
Go buy the book and read it. It'll make you
shall.
excited. Bye.
And
Okay,
can I chime in real
Willis,
quick?
do you have your hand raised, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, go for
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay. So I was wondering where to kind of interject this, and it's a much longer story than we probably have time for me to tell you all. So as you can see visually, I'm Black. About a year and a half into my disability, I experienced what I call my Rosa Parks moment while I was in Chicago. And I vowed to go back once I had enough money or enough friends with money to kind of right the wrong. But I was literally kicked off a city tour bus just because I was disabled. I mean, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I paid for my ticket. They pulled out a ramp so I could get on the bus. But yet the driver told me I had to get off the bus. She actually asked me one of the most intelligent questions that I've probably ever been asked in a wheelchair. She said, can't you get up?
Right. I love that. Our favorite question.
Yeah, right. So more or less, I was kicked off the bus. It was a long ordeal, but it was really my first taste of disability discrimination, and I think that's actually what. Before then, I was not really a advocate. My personality, after you get to know me, Hector knows this about me. I'm pretty chill, pretty laid back, don't really rock the boat, so to speak, until things like that, and that really started the process, I think, of me becoming an advocate. And it kind of fuels my fire still to do things to make sure that nobody else, has to go through those experiences. So this is an extended invite to anybody. If we ever have a conference or a reason to go to Chicago to overload that bus system, I'm definitely going to be at the front of that. So anybody wants to join me.
I think we should have a protest where we all go to Chicago and you go use the bus.
I do too, and it's not the city bus. It's a privately owned double-decker red bus. Yes, I forget the name
We'll
of
buy
them.
that tour bus and
Yes,
with our wheelchairness. Okay.
I would love to do that.
Yes, I would too. We'll get together and make a plan after the pandemic is over.
I wanted to say that we're getting close to 5:30 and see how everyone. I think the thought was to go maybe an hour and a half. And we kind of had a slow start because we're introducing everybody. But how does everybody feel? Right now we're dealing with going to school when when they're inaccessible. So that might be a good place to leave it for today. We did have a 6-minute clip from Judy Heumann that we still wanted to see before we close today. But what's your feeling, everybody? I saw one thumb up that we're still good.
Yeah, me and Anya said thumbs up. Okay. Katrina says thumbs up. Hector and Freddie, Hector's giving an emoji thumbs up. Freddie emoji thumbs up. Willis emoji thumbs up. Robin is giving a physical thumbs up.
Now, I actually need to sign off as well, but I give a thumbs up in principle. That was so nice to meet you all, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Yay, it was so good to see you, Catherine.
You too. Hell yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having the group. Bye.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye.
So we'll go for a little bit while longer. We didn't want to save 6 minutes for the close with the little clip from Judy Heumann. And then we also need to decide, is this something we want to do weekly or monthly or, never again? So what we need to decide that. So be thinking how often you want to meet. I'd be weekly, bi-monthly, or monthly, I think is the 3 choices. So we won't have to do that right now, but think about what would work for you.
Yes, think about it as we proceed with the rest of this meeting. And then at the end, we can decide. Are you going to share a slide now, Chris?
Yeah, I got to get back to my...
That's cool. I was just wondering. So what's the
Yeah.
weather like where everyone's living? It's cold here. That's why I have a beach. That's why I have a beach behind me. Because I'm like, oh, that looks warm.
Wishful thinking works.
All right.
Yes, yes.
That's what it's like in Hawaii, Priya.
I know. I lived in Miami, so I'm kind of wishing I was there right now.
Okay, so we're going into the school. So because she had that got turned down by the one school because for her wheelchair and all that, it turned out school choice gave her no options except homeschooling at a few meager hours a week. She felt, quote, that something was not quite right, but I couldn't have put it into words. So the discussion is segregated schools for persons with disabilities, while playtime with neighbors was inclusive, share personal experiences. We've been doing a little bit of that, but there's anyone else have? So the situation was for her, Judy went to a school where they were segregated, disabled students were segregated from the regular school. But when she went home, everything was integrated. And so she had this split personality thing. When I go to school, you know, I'm excluded, but when I go home, I'm included. And so it was very hard for her as a young person to relate to that.
Okay, does anyone, Tylea's gone, so she can't go first. Okay, so who would like to go
said she had a party to go to, so we got.
I know, that's cool. So who wants to go next after Tylea's imaginary comment?
We can go to another slide and then maybe see what's next. And then.
Yeah, sure, let's do that.
Oh, this was a heavy incident in her life. So she's young and she's going out with her friend is pushing her chair, one of her neighborhood mates, and they're going to a store. And at the store, there's a group of kids there, and somebody comes over and asks if she was sick. So she's talking about the effect of being asked if she was sick by a kid who passed by her in the street. Being labeled in a blinding flash, everything in my life made a perverse kind of sense. All the things she couldn't do made her different. The world thought I was sick, and I was a butterfly becoming a caterpillar. This episode made her more conscious of being disabled and made her wonder why she could not go to the same school and places her brother could. The family saw the barriers but did not talk about the reasoning of those barriers, and I didn't ask. So this is about being labeled as being different, whether we're seen as being sick or whatever. So why do we tend to keep silent in the face of discrimination, or do we? So that's the discussion. Do we keep silent when we know that we're being seen as different, or we're being even told that we're different? Or how do we face that? I'm sure we all have experiences with this, so this will be a good topic.
Oh, go ahead, Hector. You've raised your hand.
I'm gonna take.
There's a lot of
Talia's place. I'm gonna take Talia's place. I'd like to go first. Anyway, you know where this was really.
I saw you, Willis and Pauline. I didn't notice. I'll call on you after I'm done with Hector. Okay, go, Hector. Go ahead.
Yeah, this really for me chimes in the work that me and Willis started. I met Willis about 10 years ago through a United Spinal Association conference, and we had a similar friend. Oh God, why am I going blank on Finn Bueller? Thank you, Finn Bueller, and he was from Kansas City, and we thought that it was definitely time to change the and we didn't. It was more of a graffiti thing that was going on. It was called the Accessible Icon Project, and this professor from one of the universities, his students, this was graffiti art advocacy. And so what they did is they took the handicap sign and they painted over it, and they made, yes, and there's Willis showing the hat, you know, and that's the logo. So we promoted, we promoted that logo for the longest time, because remember, for all you that do or do not know, but the stick figure of a wheelchair on the handicap sign, and I really don't like to use that word, but in the accessible parking sign, at first, 1969 had no head. It was just the body of it, all right? And then 1969 or after, it was then included ahead. But what we were trying to do, and of course with the words "don't diss my ability," was all about is stop looking at what I cannot do and start looking at what I can do. And not only that, but it was also a message to the disabled community. And a message that I know Pauline talks about is valuing yourself, giving yourself value. I mean, the community seems to have our own issues, you know, about not valuing our work, not valuing our arts and stuff like that. Like, oh no, who's gonna ever want to buy this or whatever, or even our stories, you know. So when I started working with Willis and Finn, it was a real eye opener for me because I saw it in my own life. You know, I always, when I was just upset or whatever, I was always upset about what I couldn't do, and then it would take me away from really trying to explore other different ways I could do something that I couldn't do. You know, and I think that's also, I just want to touch on that. Centers for Independent Living centers also need to have like a little attitude change, because we thought in servicing the community was all about doing things for them. And what it was doing, it was just enabling the community, you know, not to do more for themselves. You know, so I think there was a big shift there as well with Center for Independent Living, where we said, hey, listen, we'll tell you where to go to get this information. We'll tell you, we'll help you with the application, but you are the actual one that needs to do it, which was a good change, because I think it empowered a lot of people with disabilities. So I just wanted to bring that up, that you know, the work that I've been doing with Willis and Finn was really trying to change attitudes, not only with the able-bodied community, but also with the disabled community. And I just love the fact that Pauline touches a lot on that as well too, that, you know, we are the ones that need to really empower ourselves or give value to ourselves in order to really feel included in this community. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you for
Thanks,
that.
Hector. And by the way, I want to tell you, North Carolina has officially made that symbol the accessible parking symbol for the state. So all the new signs that are made will have that.
All right.
That's a really good one, Priya, and I'm really happy to do that. I was only able to get a small city in Florida to adopt that, and so I just wanted to also add to that in adopting that sign, I got so burnt out about trying to support that I pulled away from it and just left it. And then I started seeing corporations adopt it as well. CVS, McDonald's, I mean, a lot of big corporations. So it's funny because last place I tried to have adopt that sign was Orlando, Florida. And man, I had a congressman there, not a congressman, a district commissioner there really support the idea. He had all these meetings. He goes, Hector, I just can't believe it, man. I mean, the biggest push that we got was from the disabled community. They didn't want to change. They didn't want to change the sign. They thought, you know, that we were asking them to change services that people with disabilities get. I said, well, first of all, you need to know that the icon is only related to accessible parking. It's about accessibility. It's not about representing a specific disability group that has accessible. That's not. So we had to go through a lot of education with that, but I was really glad to hear that this guy was just like saying, Hector, you should just go to corporations now. Go to corporations because they'll do it. And they were a lot easier to talk to than bureaucrats were in Washington. So
yeah, okay, cool. Thanks.
Any more thoughts on being seen as different and how you deal with that if that happens to you?
Willis raised his hand physically, and oh, sorry, Pauline, you can't. Should we let Pauline go first?
I don't know.
Now I feel guilty about what I just said, but I know how Pauline can handle it, so I'm just.
What a gentleman, Willis. Thank you. Yeah, no, I wanted to kind of tie in the first thing that we didn't really get to discuss about her being segregated from school, but inclusive in her neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And it all relates to this, what we're now, but I'm a product of mainstream. I don't know if they still do that in schools where they take a group of people with just kids with disabilities and they stream them in. So like if you have the same brain capacity, you attend school side by side other students, but like for PE, they pull you out and you do adaptive PE. But so I had that experience. And I think as a kid, I think we can all relate, like as kids, we don't really see labels. We're just playing with each other. And it's just easy because there's I don't even know where like this whole idea of having to label one another and compare, but I was having a conversation with somebody before, and I like disability, I would not say is my first form of identity. And and it's only when I'm in comparison with somebody else that I recognize that I'm different. But as far as having to prove myself or when people see me different, it's I just have a personal philosophy of not like I'm gonna be me, and it's not coming from a place of having to prove myself, from a place of lack. It's coming from a place of like, well, this is just me, and you know, take it or leave it. Hopefully most people take it. I'm likable, but I think for the most part, I don't approach it from a like, you don't see me or you see me different, and this kind of that kind of attitude. I feel like it's very almost combative. But I feel like if you, like what Hector was saying, if you see the value in yourself, like people can't see the value in you if you don't see it in yourself first. And so that's how I approach my life. That's it. Thank you, Willis.
Awesome. Willis, go next.
All right, and I'll apologize up front because Hector knows this about me. Whenever I say that it, you know, we're here, the short version is it normally is preceded with a long explanation. And so where I can distinctly remember after you know, my acceptance and trying to get on with it, I kind of tackled everything with my disability sort of in bite-sized, as far as like how I sell it. Like, okay, you know, now I can dread out of bed with no assistance, and you know, all these different little minute things. So after I got to the point of tackling driving and started driving, one day I was out and I was hungry. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and for some reason I had this hickory bacon cheeseburger on my mind from this one specific place that you can get it here in Oklahoma City. And I thought about the time, and I said, well, it's probably not as crowded, you know, as far as the lunch crowd and whatnot. I'll just, you know, slip in and slip out. But that's my normal personality anyway. But as the hostess is taking me to my seat, I pass these 4 individuals, 2 couples, man and woman, and they were in some kind of conversation. But as I was passing them, the people, the set that I was facing were talking, but they were looking at me. So I go to my table, which is sort of behind them. And as I'm about to look at the menu, and I'm like, oh, what am I doing? I know what I want. So I put the menu down and I look up, and now the other set of individuals are looking at me, and I'm thinking, what the, you know, what are you looking at? Do you know me? Do I know you? You know? And so that was my first like weird action. I learned from that later was that there was an opportunity, you know, not only for them to interact with me, but me to interact with them, you know, as far as like breaking the ice. Or what I started to understand, you know, I guess at my age and hopefully some wisdom of understanding people, is that people, you know, they naturally are curious about things. And I don't think that they intend to be nosy or stare at you, but their mental gets the best of them. You know, I wonder how this guy got, you know, ended up in a wheelchair. But rather than ask me, they're staring at me, you know, while they're processing and thinking. And so, so that was, you know, that particular time was awkward. But later on, like I said, I kind of had an epiphany. So as I'm going back to rehab hospitals, some of the time they would ask me to meet, you know, the new person out in the normal setting, like at lunch or something. And sometimes we'd act like it was just, you know, ironic that we ran into each other, and sometimes we actually planned it. And so by going out to lunch, some of the times the new individual would sort of point out, you know, like why I would You know, like so what I started doing was I would keep a pen and a paper with me, you know, maybe even a napkin if they had one at their table. So what I would do is take that moment to show them, you know, turn the awkwardness around. You know, you have some power. And so all this about me, but I a couple commercials and things like that, you know. So I would play on that and I would go to their table and say, hey, how's it going, guys? You know, just kind of rudely interrupt their conversation. And I would just start writing on this paper as if I was giving them my signature, right? And so sometimes they're looking at me like, what in the world is this guy doing? And I would stop and be like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you guys recognized me. You know, I thought, you know, I was going to save you the trouble of asking me for my autograph. So I thought I'd just come give it to you, you know. And so, you know, of course, that's so of course that's weird and awkward and all that. But I did it for a reason, a couple of reasons. You know, A, to kind of show them, you know, it's a little rude to stare. And if you want to know, say something, you know, interact. And then for the peer, they're like, wow, I can't believe you know, you just did that, you know. And I'm like, well, I mean, you know, they're just people, you know, so, you know, so anyway, that was just a little funny, humorous story. I'm kind of way. It helps.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks, Willis. That was, I mean,
I guess the scenario that I ran into a lot when would be going down the street, especially when I had my crutches. And there would be, you know, a woman with her child, and the child, of course, they're curious, but they talk. And they would tug on their mom and he'd say, what happened to that guy? Is he sick? Did he break his leg? And the mom would be going hush, hush. And I always felt, you know, why do that? The child is asking a question, it deserves an answer. So I would interrupt the mom from her embarrassment and say, no, it's good. And I would, you know, let the child ask the question and then talk a little bit about the disability that I have. And then the mom would relax. And so I thought I used it as like a public awareness moment. With children, with adults, it might be different, but with children, I think they're honest and they deserve to be answered, right? They deserve to ask their question.
yeah, I totally agree with that, Chris. That actually happened to me too. Like, because after I had my injury and oh, am I muted? Oh, no. After I had my injury, you know, like all my friends, I'm sure they were talking about me, and the kid, you know, was probably hearing like, oh, Priya, this happened to her. Now she's coming and we're going to get to see her, but she's going to be in a wheelchair. You know, I don't know what they were saying about me, but basically, I would go there and everybody, you know, I think everybody was probably treating me a little differently than everybody else. So the young kid, Henry, who's not that young anymore now, he's probably like in college now, but he was like, so what happened to you anyway? And I was like, and it didn't bother me, but the mom was like, Henry. And I was like, oh no, it's cool. He asked a question. I had a spinal cord injury. I fell and I broke, you know, damaged my spinal cord. And so it controls the way I can walk and I can't do it. So yeah, and I kind of think of those as teaching moments. Like that's what I like to call that. Like, you know, you have this opportunity to teach, like what Willis went through, and we go through these teaching moments. And I think like the concept of segregation, where Judy Heumann talks about it, where it's happening in a school system, but I think segregation of disability happens almost everywhere. Like if businesses aren't accessible, if like the spaces that I want to play with aren't accessible, they're segregating us essentially. And so it's kind of a concept that happens to disabled people even to this day, maybe not as much in a school system, but still, even what happened to Tylea, that's a form of segregation. So yeah, I know as disabled people, we don't always want to be in this position of teaching people things, but as far as other minorities, I do think we're a little far behind in people learning about how to include us and how to look at us, and that having a disability is not a shame. It's just another identity you have as a person. And, you know, so, you know, my thing is like, how do we get the identity of disability the same as I'm Black, I'm brown, I'm Indian, and disabled? You know, like, let it be something that just that's what you are, and there's nothing shameful about it. And I don't know, I think when we get to that point, that's when people are gonna not segregate us. They're gonna work hard to make sure everyone's included. So that's my thing about the segregation. And I can say I've dealt with segregation in many forms, but not so much like that directly, like a school system.
I think this is a good place to pause. I think we covered quite a bit of topics, and we still got a lot more to do. But if everybody feels all right with it, maybe we could. Well, first reactions of, are you enjoying this? Is this something we want to continue? How often do we want to meet? I think weekly, every other week, or monthly are the kind of the three main choices. And we do have the Christmas holidays coming up, so I don't know if that gets in the way. So. Any suggestions on how often we should meet? Priya, you're muted. Unmute, Priya.
You're still mute.
You're still on mute.
Sorry, Anya, on hourly's too quickly. Okay.
Anya wants to meet hourly, so I don't know if we can handle that.
I don't know. Hourly's a little intense, Anya.
Especially after Willis talked about that hamburger or something that he got that sounded so good.
You have to take you sometime, Chris.
Yeah, I was suggesting to Chris maybe to start off, maybe do monthly to give people time to get knowledgeable with, I know the book is expensive, so like being able to get the book, but actually learn about the 504. There's a really good short documentary about the 504 sit-in on YouTube. Just look up 504 sit-in and I'm sure something will show up. And then Crip Camp is actually on YouTube too, so that's like an excellent documentary about the disability rights movement. And yeah, you can Google all these people: Judy Heumann, Hale Zukas, Ed Roberts. There's things about them. So yeah, I don't know. I think giving a month of people to kind of become, a little bit more knowledgeable, and we'll be able to contribute to the conversation.
Yeah. So I'm seeing several people, Hector, Willis, suggesting after the holidays, so maybe like around the 10th of January. And then if we want to meet more often after the holidays are behind us, maybe that would work. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we'll meet around the first or second, probably the second Thursday of January. And I'll let Priya make sure that gets on the calendar.
I will. I don't know. Yes, I'm sorry. I see on Katrina's thing, it's saying ask to unmute, and I'm like, how do I do that? But never mind. I don't know why that showed up. Okay, so yeah, I'll do. Yeah, I'll talk to Chris off this group, and we'll figure out a date. And are Thursdays a good day for everyone? Yeah. Thursdays. Okay, cool. So maybe we'll pick up Thursday in January.
Website.
And so I put, sorry, just for fun. Oh.
Go ahead, Pauline. I see you put in your website.
No, it's not mine. It's just for fun. It's the 504, but drunk history.
Okay, I see. Good.
Oh, yeah. And drunk history actually has a much more entertaining version of that story. So
great. So that's our homework, to see that program and memorize the 504. So the next time we meet, we can just point to anybody in the group and say, okay, what's 504?
There's a new movie on Netflix, Priya. I think you'd like it. It's called The Sound of Metal. It's about a rocker, metallic metal band.
I know. I'm like,
it's it already?
It's about a metal drummer who's going deaf.
He goes deaf, yeah. Yeah. But it's very interesting, the whole process that he goes through and everything.
Yeah, I'd like to check that out.
It's an interesting movie. I just watched it some Prime, and It's one of those movies where they use a non-disabled actor, but because of the story, it kind of fits. But I think everybody has to see it for themselves to decide that. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It's on Amazon, not Netflix. That's right.
Yes, it's an Amazon Prime, and it's
But
well
there's
acted.
also a new horror movie, which Pauline and I already talked about. I don't like horror movies, so I want to watch it, but it actually has a woman in a wheelchair, and she's a wheelchair user. And Anya, what are you saying? You're raising your hand. Tell me. Why not?
I was agreeing with the horror movie thing. I'm like, I
The
can't.
horror
do it.
movie.
I thought we were going to do a watch party
Anya
with that.
We're
also
gonna do
doesn't
a
wanna
watch party, guys. We're gonna do a watch party through Crib Chat.
Yeah. All right, Pauline, are you going to take charge of the run scary movie watch party?
Yes, I will. I'm gonna put out a survey of when best work, like scheduling wise, because it'll be a live event. So
All
we'll
right.
be.
I'm ready to be scared.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back through the slides backwards to the beginning, and then we'll show this 6-minute clip from Judy Heumann.
Yeah, the Ability 360 YouTube.
I think. Okay, so does that sound good? Everybody can see the slides one more time. We'll just go back slowly, and then I'll put on that clip.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Chris, just as an option, if you want to post it, you could either post it in the Facebook group that DIY Abled created. I don't know if it's a Facebook group or if it's an event page, the slides, so people can reference it if they weren't able to make it.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Page, so you can.
Okay, I can do that both ways. I can do it to emails if people want it directly, or I can put it on the Crib Chat. So.
Or put it in the DIY Abled page.
The DIY, okay, we'll do that. Yeah.
I'll send you the link to that afterwards.
Yeah, we didn't get quite. There were 9 slides for the first prologue and chapter. We got through 6 of them, so it sounds like we have a lot to share, which is great. I mean, that's the whole point of it. So,
yeah.
So anyway, I'll still go back through the slides and see if I can get my share screen to go. Okay. And then we'll do the video. Okay. Oops. Darn it. It's going the wrong way, but that's all right. We'll go forward. Okay, that's where we'll start next time.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to go to the movie. Make sure that I have that clip. Okay, share screen.
The world. In the 1970s, Judy Heumann, Ed Roberts, and other activists started a movement that swept the country. No longer willing to accept the status quo, they fought the United States government for the rights of people with disabilities and won. In her memoir, Judy Heumann, the only daughter of German Jewish immigrants, recounts life growing up in Brooklyn, the monumental 504 sit-in at the San Francisco Federal Building, and her illustrious disability activism career, affecting change around the world. Welcome to Behind the Book with 360, with Judy Heumann and our co-author, Kristen Joyner.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Behind the Book with Ability 360, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Casey Keeler, and I am joined here by a few of my colleagues from Ability 360. Today, we will be talking with Judy Heumann and Kristen Joyner about activism in the disability community.
Can I make an observation about Judy's life as an activist? Is that it's not glamorous, and I have been an activist myself, so pulling from my own experience, but specifically commenting about Judy and her incredible achievements in terms of being an activist. It's not glamorous, and it's long-term, and you can feel like you're not going anywhere for a long time. And I think one of the ways that Judy, you've said this over and over again, but you sustained yourself was by, you were friends with your fellow activists. You were committed, your friendships and your relationships with the people who were around you were what kept you going and believing in what you were doing.
Judy, we have another question from Sochil Raskolon. She's a young activist in Phoenix.
Hi, Judy. My name is Sochil. I'm from Phoenix. So what advice would you give to young disability rights activists entering their professional and personal or volunteer activist lives?
Be knowledgeable. It's really important that you know you can't be flim-flam. Sometimes that happens because you're in a situation you don't know, but that's not really flim-flam. Be prepared. I think that's one thing that we've always found is really important, is to be prepared. Tell stories. Know your story. Know the stories of other people. Be able to think clearly about what it is that you're wanting, or working with other people to kind of define what you see as a problem and what you see as a solution. Understand that, I mean, I'm sure you do, that some of the solutions that we're fighting for in the disability community are not ones that are going to come about quickly. So look at issues that are right in front of you that you need to jump on right away, but then really look at the major issues that you're striving to achieve. I think as a rule, you want to do it in community, and as a rule, you don't want to do it just by ourselves.
Sort of the final, my big realization, it would sound funny because we should know this, but with all the schoolhouse rock, with all these sort of like, I didn't get really educated about government growing up in terms of, I got educated about the mechanisms of government, the structure, the House, the Congress, how a bill is passed, but I never really understood until I wrote with Judy about her story. I never really understood that government is the only vehicle that we have that's all about harnessing the power of the collective.
Harnessing the power of what?
Of the collective.
You can we talk about her terminology. I don't use this terminology.
It's the only vehicle we have where the powerless can come together, like disability, like Judy and the disability.
We never felt ourselves as powerless.
Well, right, but in a certain way, you're structurally powerless in society at that time, and you came together, and it's the only vehicle that allows the collective to come together to change something that represents every single person's voice. Philanthropy doesn't do that. No good, no social enterprise does that. No business does that. Government is our only vehicle that represents that. And so I think it's the most important, a democratic government. It's the most important vehicle.
So I think all of this to say that whether you have a disability or not, if you believe that something that's going on is unjust, it's really important, I think, to try at the moment to address it. Sometimes you can't, sometimes it's not the right place, but I really believe that part of why I've been able to do things that I have is in part, as I somewhat jokingly say, because I'm from Brooklyn. But the other part really is having friends with disabilities where we talked about the commonality of the kinds of problems we all face, that you know in your head, even if you're there by yourself, that you do have the support of other disabled people. And that none of us are doing these things just for ourselves, but it really is for the benefit of others. And I think that, for me, is always a driving force to, deal with it. Don't lose.
All right. Everybody catch that clip pretty well?
Martin Luther King Jr.
Oops, sorry. Let's get out of here. All right. Well, that kind of wraps it up for today.
Oh.
Thanks to Priya for getting this all going and using her site. And thanks to everybody coming in and being willing to share.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming, and definitely go check up the Ability 360 YouTube channel. There's like a lot of great little clips like that you just saw.
Has anybody ever been? I have.
Been where?
To Ability 360.
Yeah.
No. Where is
Yeah.
that? Where is it out of?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't.
Yeah,
we're
it's
about,
not too
we're
far.
about a half hour from there.
Are you? Okay. Okay. Yeah, it was amazing. It actually is part of, you guys don't know my story, but it's actually part of my inspiration for what I'm trying to do with affordable, accessible housing and a local gym. Yeah, here. So.
Oh,
yeah.
that's great, Willis.
I don't know how open it is right now because of the virus, because Arizona is really a high spike state, but
yeah.
There's some of their services are still going.
You almost make me want to move to Oklahoma, but the winters would be too hard for me.
Well, you know, they have that little season where you can, you know, fly out.
Pauline has raised her hand. So.
Oh, no, I was just wanting to respond to Willis's about Friday night movie. I did post, and if everyone's part of the Crypt Chat Facebook group, I did post a poll. If anyone wants to do that. I mean, we could do that with this movie. We could do that with future movies. Maybe that's something that we look at doing in the future.
Yeah. And the only reason I really suggested that, I was being a little selfish. I mean, because I'm always on the move and on the go. But I know a Friday night, you know, things are kind of winding down. You know, hey, I could do that. You know,
yeah,
a little
me
popcorn.
Too.
Yeah.
Yes, I love popcorn. Yeah. Okay. Chris and Priya, thanks so much for taking initiative and doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I was really excited. I always wanted to do something with her book because it's so amazing. And
yeah,
when Chris said
I never knew about
it, I was like, yes, okay, let's do it, Chris.
Yeah. I never knew about it, so I appreciate you putting it on my radar. So.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, you should tell Willis. You need to be familiar with Judy Heumann. You're gonna love her.
Good deal.
Watch Crypt Camp. That's your and the drunk history. But yeah, I mean, in the future, like I even not to continue this conversation, maybe we could do it next time. But that clip, even with some of the things that was said there, I'd love to maybe have a discussion about, because not everything I agree with what they were saying, so it's interesting.
Right.
I'd be interested in hearing what other people's thoughts were.